and not the president. The U.S. and Russia are just hours away from ending the last major nuclear arms control treaty between the two nations. As NPR's Jeff Brumfield reports, experts say this marks a turning point.
The treaty is called New START, and it went into force 15 years ago. Rose Gadamer negotiated New START with the Russians. She says it was the latest in a decades-long effort to reduce the number of nuclear weapons each side deploys.
It's been a steady reduction down to 1,550 on each side.
But the treaty can't be renewed, and any hope for a follow-up treaty ended with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has offered a one-year informal extension to New START's limits, and Gadamer thinks President Trump should take him up on it.
Otherwise, we're into the depths of a nuclear arms race, and that's an expensive proposition.
New START expires at midnight. Jeff Brumfield, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
You're listening to WJCT News, 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. A local state of emergency is in effect for Putnam County due to the threat of wildfires from dry conditions. That means no outdoor burning is allowed except for outdoor grills and commercial land clearing with supervision from Florida Forest Service. The ban follows a wildfire over the weekend in western Putnam near Pace Court that left smoky conditions in the Interlochen area. Officials say violating the burn ban is a second-degree misdemeanor subject to a fine of up to $500 for each offense and a 60-day jail sentence. State officials say overall the fire danger level is moderate in northeast Florida. The Artemis II mission will remain on the ground in Florida for at least another month. Brendan Byrne reports issues during a test this week are prompting a delay of the astronaut moon mission until at least next month.
After a practice run of launch day, teams ran into a number of issues, including a hydrogen fuel leak, a problem with the spacecraft's hatch, and communication dropouts. NASA's delaying an attempt to launch the Artemis II mission this month as crews work to fix the issues. Here's Launch Director Charlie Blackwell-Thompson.
So all in all, a very successful day for us on many fronts, and then on a couple of others, we got some work we got to go do.
The team will need to conduct another rehearsal before giving the go to launch the crew. The next launch window now opens on March 6th. The crew of 4 is made up of 3 U.S. astronauts and 1 from Canada. They've been released from quarantine and will remain in Houston, Texas. I'm Brendan Byrne in Orlando.
Rain in the forecast this afternoon and tonight in northeast Florida. Highs will reach the lower 70s today.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric and Wendy Schmidt through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, resurgent measles hit Florida at a college and a detention center in Texas. We talk about all that and the latest medical news with our resident doc, Dr. Joe Sirven. Later in the program, the beach's mayors want your input on e-bike safety, and we'll tell you about an environmental town hall meeting tonight. But first, I am joined as I am each month by our own Dr. Joe Sirven of WJCT's program and podcast, What's Health Got to Do with It? He helps us break down the latest medical headlines, and he takes your calls and questions on any healthcare topic. Welcome, Dr. Joe.
Hey, it's so good to be here with you, Ann. February, I feel like I was just here a few weeks ago.
I know, and I outed you this morning when I was talking to Stephen Ponson about your habit of bringing us muffins in the morning. So
some habits I just can't get rid of. Right,
well, we love it. So the newsroom is very happy. I want to start talking about this measles outbreak because it's something that has been in the news, but also some additional news yesterday, in particular because a Southwest Florida college, Ave Maria University, has now had 3 or 4 students hospitalized with measles. What does this tell us about the state of measles in Florida? I also mentioned this ICE detention center facility that has children in it now under quarantine in Texas because of measles cases there. What do we know about what's happening big picture?
Big picture is that this is reflecting what the other headlines, and I know we've chatted about this in our previous house calls. This is just kind of a continuation of the same story. Once upon a time, we were talking about the Texas outbreak in the summer. More recently, we're talking about the South Carolina outbreak. After the holidays, we talked about the airport. This is the continuation of it. Measles, just as a reminder, everyone, literally one of the most infectious viruses known at this time, until something else is discovered, known to humans in general. Each person who has measles has the ability to infect somewhere between 14 to 17 other people. It is that contagious. The reason it's so contagious is, number one, it can hang around in a lot of places. It could be in the air for up to like a few hours after an infected person has left the room. It's that type of stuff. And then the other thing is that it loves to find unvaccinated people. And so with vaccination rates going down, this is what we get. So this is not a surprise. If anything, it's sad because it's preventable. It's so preventable. If you get vaccinated, you're protected. That's the most important thing to know about it. And the last thing I'll say on the thing about measles is that it's not just measles. Measles has a lot of complications that we can't predict in people. For many, it works out fine, but for some, it can be very, very bad. That's why you're talking about hospitalizations. People who've gone through measles will tell you it is no fun walk in the park.
So in terms of infections and what we know locally, we've only heard here locally about a couple of cases in Duval County, 2 children, a case in St. Johns County. As far as we know, it doesn't go beyond that. But I want to ask you, because how we learned about the cases in Duval County was because Channel 4 got a tip that there had been a couple of pediatric cases at a local hospital. It was not reported by the Department of Health until they were specifically asked about it. What is the deal there? That does not help anybody. The whole point, especially in a situation with measles, something that infectious, is surveillance. Surveillance is for the purpose of letting people know, letting people know, because then you can action on that. That should not be the way this is managed. Do we have any understanding as to why the local health department would not have released that information?
I do not know why that would be the case. This is one of those things that schools need to know, hospitals need to know. There's immunocompromised people out there. This is the type of thing that can hurt folks. So no, I don't know what the reasons are, and I don't know any of that part, but I will just say that letting people know is important because that's how we can action on stuff. This is why we're talking about it, so people can get vaccinated or do what they need to do or cover up in order to make sure that they're safe.
So measles was declared eradicated, eliminated 25 years ago or so. Can the U.S. still say that it has been eradicated at this point?
It's coming close to losing it. The determination by that is by the World Health Organization. And even if we're not a member, they will still make a determination on that. It is set to be looked at, to my understanding, in April of this year. So that is when April 2026 is when they will make that determination. Just to give you a heads up, some other very friendly countries to the U.S., very developed, have just lost their status of eradication. That includes our neighbor to the north, Canada, but also other places like the United Kingdom, Australia, Austria, Spain. They all lost it just recently. In fact, at the end of January, the World Health Organization announced that those countries had lost it. There's a lot of travel between U.S. and some of those places, and that just may be an indication of where we're headed in April. When we're talking about this, and I know I talk about it on our show as well, it just tells me this is not a good sign. But April at that time we'll know. And if they lose it, what it means is that it's no longer random and like a one-off deal, but rather it's freely spreading through the community.
We're talking to Dr. Joe Sirven. He is a neurologist. He is with us every month for a monthly house call. He takes your questions on any healthcare topic. And you are welcome to join the conversation. You can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find all the ways to connect with us. And we do have some questions coming in on email and social. First one from Michael emailing, what does Dr. Joe advise for 70-somethings regarding measles vaccination?
So if you have had the standard two shot dose of vaccine, you should be in good shape. The only time that I would worry in a situation is if, let's say you're immunocompromised. Let's say you're on some type of medication. That is the moment that you could talk to your doctor. And if they feel that they need to, they can recheck a titer. I actually did that for myself because as a healthcare worker, I had a curiosity and I was like, yeah, what about all this? And lo and behold, my titer ended up being low and I ended up having to get a booster shot.
Well, I've understood, we talked, I think, briefly on this program about the fact that some cohort of people born between like 65 and 68 or something like that, that they were given a dead virus and not a live virus and
Correct.
should think about getting re-immunized.
And that's why you should be talking, that's why you have to look at do you have vaccine records? Is there recollection? Are you going to be exposed? If you're in a risk factor, older adult, pregnant woman, someone who is sick currently with some type of immune condition, those are good reasons to talk to your doctor to see whether they need to recheck it just to be safe. In this regard, this is one of those you do want to chat about.
Emily on Facebook, if there's already a few officially recorded cases in our counties, should we assume that it's already in the dozens or hundreds by now, since so many might not see the doctor right away, quarantine? Certainly, we don't know if everybody is reporting this illness.
Emily is absolutely on the money on that. Normally this is like, tips of icebergs. You would get this type of data if we were looking, let's say, at wastewater or something along those lines, like they do in COVID, where they can detect whether it's like, even though we don't know the numbers, sometimes by tracking pieces of virus in wastewater, you can do that. I don't know if they do that in measles. I don't think they do. So my sense is I suspect that there's more cases than just the ones that we are seeing, hearing in the news, if you will.
She had a follow-up. Is there any accountability to anyone to ask to hold responsible for the lack of communication and transparency from the health department?
That is out of the medical world. That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
All right. I've got a call from John on the South Side. Good morning, John. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the discussion. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on the need for vaccinations and to discourage people from being uncertain about the need to vaccinate their children. But also regarding public policy, over the last number of years, we've had a large influx of people coming across the border. What's the policy regarding those people, potentially from third world countries, developing nations where they don't have these sorts of vaccinations? What's the policy for preventing people from those countries entering that might spread measles and various other diseases? Thank you.
Dr. Joe?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So the policy is going to be, there's not a blanket necessarily policy on some of this. In other words, it's going to depend on who's coming in. If it's a kid and they're enrolling in the school, then those mandates, when you enroll in a certain age, that's what's going to take impact, and that's how you'll know that person got vaccinated. If those people are working in healthcare or some type of other job that has elements of checking into that, they will be captured in that. If you're not in those roles, yeah, there's nothing that says you cannot be infected in that regard.
I should say our producer and your producer, Stacey Bennett, says that when it comes to U.S. Customs and Immigration Services, if you're applying for a U.S. immigrant visa or you're seeking lawful permanent resident status, you must receive specific vaccinations. And currently that includes the MMR, polio, tetanus, diphtheria, and a handful of others that are no longer required, for instance, by our state. I've got a call from Bob in Lakewood. Good morning, Bob. Go ahead.
Hello, doctor, and good morning. I'm wondering about leg cramps. I'm an older person, but I do keep up with my exercises somewhat, not religiously, but I also get, not during exercising, but maybe during the day, leg cramps.
Mm.
What causes it? What can I do maybe to prevent them?
Thanks, Bob. I mean, those can be really disruptive and painful.
So leg cramps can be a sign of a lot of different things. So number one, I would want to make sure that when you talk to your doctor about this, number one, what about the prescription medications? Certain medications, especially common ones like cholesterol lowering medications, sometimes they can cause things that feel like cramps, and other people it feels like ache. So that I'd be looking in your own medicine cabinet and asking about potential side effect. The other thing is to look for certain vitamin deficiency. Sometimes iron deficiency can present as cramps. The third thing is make sure that there's nothing wrong with circulation in the legs. So in other words, there's several items here that could produce something like cramps, whether they occur just at night versus whether they occur only during the day. Those are the questions that kind of your primary care or other doctor could help you with. But there's a lot of different possibilities. It's a common symptom. That's why checking out all these different possibilities may help to kind of make it work for you so you can get some relief from that. I hope you feel better with it.
I hear sort of like the colloquial answer there is like hydrate, eat a banana, right? I mean, is there anything that you could try before taking it to the doctor level?
I think this is one of those things, if it's so persistent, and I don't know all the story, this is just one of those things that I would
err on the side of...
I'd be very conservative because you just don't know.
Okay. I want to talk about the WHO because you alluded to that when we were talking about measles spread. The Trump administration is now fulfilling a promise that they made on day one with an executive order that the U.S. is pulling out of the World Health Organization. This is an agency that does a lot of things, but one of them is disease tracking, particularly when it comes to flu. What are the public policy, public health concerns about not being part of the WHO? What are the implications?
Well, actually, it's a pretty big implication. So what we get from the World Health Organization with regards to flu surveillance is that typically, if you follow the typical flu season over a given year, the U.S. And North America is a lagging country compared to others. In other words, the flu season starts in places like South America, Europe, Australia. And so what you see going on in the southern hemisphere of the globe, that tends to predict the flu strains that are going to come to the north portion of the globe. As such, then the vaccines that are created that we all go out and get in September, October are created based on the prediction of what was the prevalent strains of the flu virus happening in those southern hemisphere area. We get that data from the World Health Organization surveillance. So when we're not part of that, then that means that our predictions for flu vaccines and like what variant they should be targeting may not be as accurate as they could be. And therefore, if you think about it, that is a very practical day-to-day life. All of us go out and get these flu vaccines, but it may be off because we don't have that data. So it's going to depend on how good the prediction is made by the people making that flu vaccine.
And the Trump administration has said that they will rely on, quote, trusted institutions to provide this information, but they so far have not named any of these. They haven't confirmed if these institutions will be qualified to conduct disease surveillance. So there's unanswered questions there. And it's not just the flu, although the flu is itself deadly. We know that there's been 18 million people in the U.S. sickened so far this year. Nearly 10,000 have died, including 32 children. So it is, very serious consequences. But you alerted me this morning to an infection that has occurred, a couple of cases for a very infectious disease. Can you update us on what we know about Nipah?
The Nipah virus. So this is one of those is very concerning. but I'm going to try to put it in context so that we don't get too nervous about it at this point. So the Nipah virus, there is a small outbreak, very small, that was reported in one of the southern states of India. The Nipah virus is well known for two reasons. Number one, it was what the movie Contagion was partially based on. Yeah. It has a ridiculously high fatality rate. Between 40 to 70% of people who get it die, wow. Period. It's just like they play the movie. The vector is a fruit bat. And so it is only through that direct communication with that animal that you get it.
Well, initially, I mean, it's spread human to human, right?
It is. The fruit bat's the first part,
okay.
But then it can spread to human, but only through direct contact with the body fluids or sources that way. And so here's going to be good news, bad news. The good news to that is that when something has such a horrific high fatality rate and it is not airborne, rather it's like direct contact to fluid, the transmission from human to human is very low. And so that's why you can contain those. But sadly, to those who get it, to direct contact, if you will, it has a very high fatality rate. So that is another example of where World Health Organization that they would know that. I mean, what's happening in the southern state of India or in Southeast Asia, that's the type of information that you want to glean to be protected. There is no immunity for that. There's no vaccine, but we should know that this is happening because people travel.
So tell us, if we're not part of the WHO, we're hearing about this anyway, this Nipah virus, small level outbreak in India. Right. So we know about it as individuals. Right. What is it that the WHO would provide if we were going to remain a member that we should care about?
I think a few things. It starts making policy about travel, about what protective elements there are, isolating the bug, if you will, so that people can do, like, let's say that we were on the verge of something horrible, pandemic, so people can kind of isolate, sequence the whatever the bug is.
So the research element.
And also begin work on how to put an end to it. What's the best approach? What's the best advice? Is it airborne? Is it not? All of those elements.
So generally, researchers are working together through that global organization, and we won't have access to that information.
We will not. Now, there are some good news that there's always a little bit of hope in some of these things. Interestingly enough, although a country can be a member of the World Health Organization, technically, individual U.S. states can actually listen in and represent themselves at the World Health Organization. And interestingly, California is done exactly that. They join the calls as just the state of California. They're not recognized. They don't get all that element, but they're at least listening. And so I put that as a sense of hope, is that some states could actually choose to do that individually and still get some of the information.
We're talking to Dr. Joe Sirven about medical headlines. We're also taking your calls and questions on any healthcare topic. If you have a question and you want to reach the doctor, you can call us on air at 904-549-2937, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find all of the other ways to connect with us. One other related matter, this has to do with in-country tracking of disease. The CDC, which has traditionally provided very transparent databases about dozens of diseases that are of concern and that are contagious. This new report has found that they've stopped updating these data sets. Some of them haven't been updated since April, and it is now becoming an issue for people who are trying to monitor disease. Very often, healthcare providers rely on this information to make recommendations to their patients.
This is another one of those troubling items, and just tells us that the CDC is in trouble, if anything. We use the CDC for a lot of different purposes, from everything from acute infections that we've just been talking about to chronic disease monitoring. and not having that data, it's just you're flying blind, especially in a data-driven society that we live in now, where are the numbers, where are the patients, where are the issues, where should you direct resources? It just puts us in a blind spot. I don't know why those data sources are not being provided, but at the end of the day, it doesn't help us.
Dr. Jeannie Marazzo, who is the former director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, she was fired in the fall, but she labeled this a profound disregard for human life. Basically, half of CDC databases no longer updated. They found in this report that 38 of 82 databases that previously had been updated at least monthly have no new entries at all in the last 6 months.
Yeah, so this is I can't disagree enough. I mean, again, we live in a very data-driven system. In order to know where to put resources, where to put people, what to put focus on, you have to have the information. If you're not, you're flying blind.
So the CDC is also somewhat out of step on the vaccine schedules, and I just want to touch on that too, because the American
Academy of Pediatrics
is now not recommending what the CDC is recommending. They're making their own set of recommendations when it comes to what shots children should get.
So the American Academy of Pediatrics went to literally the same vaccine schedule before they made the current change by the ACIP and the Department of Health and Human Services. They basically just went back to where we were exactly a month ago or whenever it was that we changed. They are recommending the full 17 vaccines. They were very instrumental in the creation of that original vaccine schedule. So they're just back to where we were. And so they've basically, that's what they have put out there, with the understanding that the U.S. is a fragmented healthcare system. Therefore, we need those extra vaccines to serve as the safety net for all of these other type of conditions that suddenly were taken off the list of vaccines.
I mean, this has got to be very confusing for people, particularly parents who are trying to make very consequential healthcare decisions for their kids, and they're being told, this is what the federal government recommends. It's no longer consistent with what the federal government has been recommending. It's not clear that they are tracking the data that might help the CDC make its decisions and recommendations. And parents are now being told, to decide.
So this has been one of the biggest true effects of all of this, has been just confusion and a bit of chaos. What we do know is that parents are asking their pediatricians, what should we do? Most of them, interestingly, are following the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations, as are most pediatricians, per reports that I'm reading in the press, such as in the Washington Post, stating that they are going down that road. And that's what I hear from colleagues too, that there's not been this sense of just following what's being put out there, but more still holding on to the more traditional vaccine schedules that have been put out there.
All right. I want to move on to some other health headlines, not related to necessarily the federal government or any databases. Psychiatric disorders.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting new study that found, that perhaps these 14 common psychiatric disorders are not as disparate as people thought, and that perhaps they should be put into just 5 buckets that are less varied and perhaps more related than we previously thought.
I love this study because basically what it showed that when they looked at the genetics of people who have certain disorders, everything from depression or anxiety to post-traumatic stress, they looked at the genetics of this, and they found that the genetics of these conditions seem to unite these conditions more than they differentiated them. This is a big deal because the main Bible for psychiatric diseases, the DSM-5 is where we are now. They're about to release or in the process of creating DSM-6. That is the standard code of what are the diagnoses in psychiatry. So what this does is it tells us that you don't have because of the way that we currently do it, people end up with 5 or 6 diagnoses, that I have ADHD, I have anxiety, I have XYZ, and people walk out demoralized of geez, I have all these conditions. But the truth is that's just humans, segregating out these conditions that actually may not be separate things at all, but rather they're connected genetically. And that's why medications that you use for one of those conditions seem to work for others, because at the end, it's a spectrum and less of a finite thing.
I thought there was a fascinating metaphor that one of the researchers used that said, if you go to a doctor with a runny nose, a cough, and a sore throat, you're not diagnosed with a runny nose disorder,
Right,
a cough
right.
disorder, and a sore throat disorder, and you're not prescribed 3 separate pills.
Exactly.
So this is a study that basically says some of these things, if you are grouping things into substance use disorders or neurodevelopmental conditions like autism and ADHD or compulsive conditions, that you can kind of group and perhaps better treat some of these ailments.
I think that is really where we're going to, because what we're going to find, like they found that bipolar and schizophrenia, that there are more commonalities. It's just that they present in slightly different ways. But that's huge for treatment, because at the end it may mean that there's more targeted treatments that kind of scatter across this, and less labeling, because labeling seems to lead to stigma. And it gets to people, again, very demoralized when they're being told about the thousands of diagnoses they have, and maybe that's just not the way it is.
Yeah. I want to ask you as well about some research into nature versus nurture when it comes to longevity. And this is something that may surprise and disappoint people who have been, creating these lifestyle recommendations, influencers who are very into promoting longevity through supplements or some kind of wellness program. This finds that there may be more in your genetic predisposition than in any of your lifestyle choices.
So this is one of those that when I read it, I'm like, duh. But I don't want to besmirch the research. I thought this was like one of those very well done studies looking at twins. And twins are fascinating because identical twins, genetically, they share 100% of the same DNA, but what you can decipher from them is that wherever they live, that tells you more about the environment and what happens to them and how it pertains to what happens to your genes. And so what they found is that almost 50% of longevity, like your choices, how long you live, is based in your genes. I took it, all wellness influencers, all hope is not lost for you. It just means that in our code is a certain amount of longevity. Now, whether you reach the end of your longevity, the longest you can, is based on these environmental decisions you make. So if I'm coded to live into my 90s, well, if I make it to my 90s, it's going to depend on the decisions I make about my food and exercise and mental health. So there's still a bit of a role for day-to-day decisions, but for some different people are born with different sense of longevity. And, in humans, that can, the longest I think it's been reported is 120 years or something like that. Only some people are coded that way. And whether you arrive there, it's going to depend a lot on those decisions. So yes, your decisions and choices, and yes, my poor decision to bring muffins to the station this morning, they do
factor in.
They do,
but
factor
not
in.
as much. What's interesting is that this study, says, as you say, that the genetic contribution to how long we live can be as high as 55%.
Yeah.
Previous estimates were about 6 to 33%, and so the people who were promoting lifestyle changes, and surely they still will, had a much greater argument for how long you live may depend as much as 80% on the choices that you're making.
And I never kind of, the thing is that I always had the sense that this is going to be a 50% situation. That's why I said when I looked at the numbers, it was not surprising to me as I looked at it. But
is the review from Dr. Joe. I want to touch briefly on this cancer death for young people, colorectal cancer, because this is really an outlier. We know that, younger people are getting cancers more frequently, but colorectal cancer is now such an outlier because the death rate is continuing to rise. Whereas in other cancers, even if they're becoming more common among young people, aren't being fatal cancers. But colorectal cancer is seeing death rates since 2005 climbed by 1% every year, which is just an astonishing number.
Yeah, this is one of those items that tells us that we need to find a better way to do detection and screening in this. The thing about colorectal cancer is by the time that someone has symptoms, you're already at a place where things have spread or gotten to a place that your interventions are not going to be as broad in terms of getting it under control. So this turns us back into perhaps we need to rethink screening. The other thing is the environmental level of this. How much, another piece of headlines, how much does alcohol intake play into this, or other decisions that one makes environmentally? Those
dietary.
Absolutely. That's where this comes into it. And we don't have all those answers, but it does seem to all be kind of taking us to a place that we need to be doing a better job with screening and making better decisions and better research to kind of give people actionable advice in terms of how to curb this, because this is a bit of a surprise to see how this is kind of increasing like this. These numbers are not something we're seeing in other cancers for that matter.
Right, and people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are starting to see not just cancer detection, but fatalities. And contrary to what we were saying in just the previous conversation,
Right.
This really might be one of those places where those lifestyle choices are going to be determinant.
Absolutely. I think of it like, for instance, we get, once you're of a certain age, you get colonoscopies that are very routine.
When are those supposed to begin?
There's in the 50s, sometimes late 40s, depending on family history and if there's a direct link is something in that direction. But normally I was in the 50s, you start seeing that people start getting routine colonoscopies. Maybe they need to be shunted to earlier decades of years, depending on risk factors. Again, if family members have had colorectal cancer, this is a reason to kind of be checking in just to make sure you're in a safe place for that.
Well, Dr. Joe Sirven, we love having you on. It's great to visit with you and to get caught up on some of the medical headlines. Dr. Joe Sirven's program and podcast, What's Health Got to Do with It, airs on WJCT News 89.9, Saturdays at 4. And of course, you can catch it on your own schedule on your favorite podcast platform anytime. Dr. Joe, thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure. Look forward to our next time.
All right. Up next, local experts give an update on the state of the environment in St. Johns County at a town hall tonight. We hear from one of the featured speakers just after this. Welcome back. An environmental town hall in St. Augustine tonight explores how our everyday choices impact the environment around us, from local water quality to sea level rise. One of the featured speakers is here to give us a preview. Katie Bauman is the Florida Policy Manager for Surfrider Foundation. Katie, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So these are big issues to tackle. How do you create a forum for a useful and practical discussion? How do you kind of narrow the focus in a way that helps people approach this topic and also feel like there's something that they can do about it?
Absolutely. That is the starting question. And it is one that we talk about a lot in this work and in nonprofit work and environmental. And so the core goal, the start of that is we're going to talk about how we talk about these things, how you engage with others, your friends, your family, your coworkers. That is the start of this town hall. And then we're going to dive in more specifically to these issues that we're facing in Northeast Florida, but really across the state. And so that's then when we're going to dive into top button concerns, land management and sea level rise, water quality, and coastal resilience. And throughout all of that discussion, you're going to see the intertwining of these issues with the focus being, what can we do? How do we take what we learn about it and how do we put that into action in our everyday lives and in what we're looking to do through work, through interactions and other things like that?
And so we mentioned you were with Surfrider Foundation, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is. But in terms of the other participants, tell us who they represent or who they are and kind of what angle they're going to approach this town hall from.
Absolutely. So it is an incredible lineup of local experts and leaders in their field. Tim Deegan, longtime First Coast News chief meteorologist, will be there, and he will really be setting up this conversation. Someone with such experience talking with so many people, and how do we talk about this? What do we look to bring into that conversation and what we're doing with that and setting it up for us? And then Jen Lomberg, the Matanzas River Keeper, she'll be really diving into water quality issues and what do we see in our local Northeast waterways, and then how does that build out into what we're looking at across the state. And then also Dr. Todd Osborne, who's a professor of biogeochemistry at U.S. Whitney Lab, and he'll be looking at sea level rise and land management and how our choices and decisions there are impacting what we see, the science behind that. Then I'll be speaking about coastal resilience and really focusing more on the policy lens and how we can engage in community and stewardship to further those policy goals. Of course, all of this led by Rona DiCamillo, who is the with the League of Women Voters, who'll be moderating.
And this is a free and open to the public forum, so people are invited to attend. And we also do have a streaming link on our website if people are interested in joining from that perspective. Your own background is on the intersection of policy and law and public engagement, and you have a legal background, you have a policy background. How much of the issue that is facing us as Floridians or globally is happening on the policy level or in the courts as opposed to on the ground among just ordinary people doing their daily thing?
Right, a lot of it. And the goal behind it is that we have to have it happening in all these different arenas. We have to have the policy and the law working and informed by community on the ground, impacts on the ground, data and science from what we're seeing. And so that lens that we bring to it, and really what I think this town hall will explore, is these three big areas: community, stewardship and science, and policy. And they all interact together. Community being how are we informed by what people are seeing, by what we're saying, by what can work? And then just stewardship and science. What is the data telling us? How are we investing in these places and having those personal experiences that then inform what we can do in policy, seeking that change on the local level, state level, national level, international, and then through the courts where we need to be enforcing things or upholding what the law is.
And so you're having these conversations at the same time. There's been some really seismic changes in terms of either the state or the federal level commitment to environmental change. And just recently, we're seeing this administration has pulled out of 66 international organizations and treaties, including the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So these are groups that are focusing big picture on trying to stop the warming of the planet and the destructive things that will yield. How, as somebody who's trying to affect policy or just inform the public about what to be doing, how do you speak about the challenges that are happening as we see just pulling back from momentum on helping the planet, survive, or at least the humans on this planet survive
Right.
the planet?
To keep enjoying and thriving in these places that we have been. And so one of the approaches is you focus on the local. You focus on where you see the impact and where you can connect with people and continue to build that support. Of course, this is happening with a difficult backdrop, but building that support on the local and then to the state, you focus your strategies where you can. And so that we continue to move forward and serve our communities here, serve our coast here. And that relationship development and protection does contribute to that larger, those big picture goals that we have when you can build that out in community, when you can help people to understand why these choices right now relate to those larger international treaties and goals that can seem distant or not related, but are very much part of our everyday lives, especially as we see changes to our coast here in Northeast Florida and really across the state. And so honing in when there are, overarching difficulties on the local and on the state approach, that is a goal that we have and one that Surfrider really moves forward with.
What do you personally recommend to people when it comes to trying to do something that can be effective on a significant basis? Something that they feel like they really could affect change, make a difference.
My first advice to anyone is build relationships based on that thing you love, that place you want to go, the fishing spot you want to protect, the beach you walk on every morning. That is your connection to other people, to your local decision makers. And so use that to find the next step. And that might be engaging in a cleanup, going to a town hall meeting, going to an advocacy opportunity and speaking at a council meeting or something along those lines. And as you keep taking those steps forward, you're going to continue to understand and grow an appreciation for this thing that you love, and also the work that it takes to protect it and ensure that generations after you will also be able to see it. So it starts with relationships and talking, and then that education and awareness.
So tonight's environmental town hall, as we said, is open to everybody. Who do you encourage to come?
Everyone, everyone. And I encourage everyone to come because, again, this conversation is about having more conversations and the input from the audience. Those questions are going to be critical. A good part of this town hall is going to be about responding to the questions of people who are there. And if you cannot come, find us on the live stream. Watch that live stream. Reach out to these different speakers later, these different groups. There are so many incredible groups doing this work here in Northeast Florida and across the state that can really give you that entry point and that next step that you're looking for.
Does the live stream offer an opportunity to submit questions, or do you have to be there in person?
The live stream does not. You need to be there in person to submit questions, but information will be available about every speaker, our related organizations, and there are more opportunities. Surfrider has a First Coast chapter, which is volunteer-led, and that stretches from Fernandina down to St. Augustine with meetings every month.
The Environmental Town Hall, it's at Flagler College's Lewis Auditorium. Starts at 6:30. Katie Bauman, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back with a survey about e-bikes, how they're impacting everyone's safety.
Congaree and Pen, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpen.com. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Accidents can happen when you least expect it. For decades, our attorneys have dug out the facts to help juries decide who's at fault.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
On the next Fresh Air, we're heading into a dictatorship if we're not already in one. That's what our next guest, historian and Atlantic magazine writer Robert Kagan, is warning. He's a former Republican and author of Rebellion, Donald Trump and the Anti-Liberal Tradition in America. He says the anti-liberal tradition dates back to the Revolutionary War. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
The Trump administration has now published its national security strategy and its national defense strategy.
I would weigh it very seriously. It appears to reflect the president's views. I think this administration will follow it more closely because Trump has valued loyalty so much.
How will deprioritizing Europe and diluting focus on China help U.S. national security? That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Haitians represent one of the largest groups under the government's temporary protected status program. The Trump administration is trying to end it. More than 300,000 Haitian immigrants in the U.S. faced having their legal status removed this week. A judge blocked the ending of those protections temporarily. What's ahead for Haitian immigrants in the U.S. and for TPS? Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, if you've ever ridden an e-bike on the streets of Jacksonville or ever been nearly hit by one, you probably have some thoughts about their safety. A new survey wants to hear from you. Here to tell us more, we're joined by Talia Fuste. She's a transportation planner with the North Florida Transportation Planning Organization, which, note, is also an underwriter of WJCT. Thanks for being here, Talia. Nice to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so this is a pilot study into e-bikes, and I understand that you're doing it because it was actually asked of the TPO by the mayors in the Jacksonville Beaches communities.
Yes, the mayors are getting a lot of pushback on e-bikes. They're hearing a lot of incidents, kind of like you were saying, that e-bikes are all over the roadways and maybe some concerns for safety-wise, and they were looking for us to potentially create a policy that could help you if you're riding from one end of the beaches to the next end, that you would be able to know all the laws and regulations that would coincide for all of those cities, and so that we could safely create a policy for law enforcement to enforce and create a safer network for these e-bikes in these areas.
And obviously they're looking for some data to build that policy around. Mm-hmm. Are they hoping to create some sort of like contiguous rules that would apply to all three communities so that they're somewhat in line with each other?
Exactly. So the rider would not have to think about it, and law enforcement would all be on the same page.
Yeah. And so the survey is asking not just people who live in the beaches, but also people who visit the beaches, which is a pretty big community of people. Tell us a little bit about what the rules are for participating in this survey, how long it's open, and what are the types of questions that you're asking?
Yeah, so when we're looking at the survey, we're looking for anyone who's visiting the beaches communities, anybody who rides bikes out there in general and exists there. But we're really looking to hear about, are you wearing a helmet? Are you riding there? Kind of some questions that kind of give what's going on the ground there. What are you seeing in the community? And we're just going to have this up until the end of the week.
So cyclists, and I probably count myself among them, have gotten accustomed to breaking the rules in some cases. You know, we don't always stop for every four-way stop. You know, sometimes we're on the sidewalk, sometimes we're off the sidewalk. But when it comes to e-bikes, that really is this hybrid sort of cusp species between, you know, a vehicle and a bicycle, and they can pose a lot more danger for riders, but also for people who are walking or even driving other vehicles.
Yeah, exactly. I think that when you're going faster than a typical bike, it's hard for pedestrians and other cars to understand that you're going to be going a bit faster. You might want to go faster and zoom around people, but that's not necessarily what you can be doing on an e-bike. When you're on the sidewalk, you need to be yielding to pedestrians. You need to be verbally telling people where you're at, and you really need to be following the rules of the roadway.
Some of this is, you know, the very nature of an e-bike. And I feel like some of it is also the way that our experience as pedestrians has changed. And you see a lot of people walking around with their ear pods in or their headphones on and not necessarily able to respond when a cyclist is giving them some sort of heads up that they're coming through. How does that new reality play into just overall, you know, bicycle pedestrian safety and the way that you guys are looking at the issue?
Yeah, it just has to be awareness overall. We need to be telling our children and even adults in general that you need to take your headphones out when you're on an e-bike. If you're walking in general, you need to be aware of who's around you, because at the end of the day, it is your safety that you need to look out for when you're walking on our roadways or if you're on the sidewalk in general.
Is the ultimate solution going to be building additional infrastructure? I mean, is that what needs to happen? Something that can accommodate both regular bikes and e-bikes off the main traffic path?
I think it's a combination of things. Infrastructure is definitely one of the main routes to create a safer environment for us all. I think that off-road paths or larger shared use paths combined with education would be the best way to keep people safe. Because a lot of these trails that are away from the roadways are what people like to ride on, or that's what I hear people liking to ride on. However, that would be combined with pedestrians. So we still need to find a way to educate riders and pedestrians to work together in this conversation.
Education is one thing when you're talking about perhaps buying a bike for your child or just as an adult being aware of the rules. But a lot of especially in coastal Florida, a lot of the people who are on e-bikes are renting them. They're not necessarily purchasing them. And there's a lot of places that rent them. What is the task there of getting people who are, you know, in the business of renting these bikes to communicate better with people who are riding them?
I think it's a number of things. I think it's an overall messaging. I think that when you do rent something, you think maybe this isn't as big of a responsibility, but I think that the companies who are renting them out definitely need to make people aware of the rules, ensure that they're wearing helmets, because that's just the number one thing that I see in general when it comes to rule breaking, that younger children are not wearing helmets, even if they're renting them or their parents are renting them for on apps and such like that.
And we know that the Florida legislature has been looking in the last couple sessions, in some cases adopting some, you know, guidance about e-bike safety. Is there anything that the TPO is watching this legislative cycle or advocating for that could come before lawmakers?
Yeah, right now there's a House bill and a Senate bill that's talking about changing e-bikes that are going over 28 miles per hour to e-motorcycles. They're looking at creating a task force to investigate e-bikes and what they can do for safety in general. There's a number of things when it comes to not letting children without licenses ride those faster e-bikes and giving out fines. So there's a number of things circling right now to create a bigger environment of safety around these things.
Well, the North Florida TPO Beaches e-bike survey is open until February 10th. We've got a link on our website if you would like to participate in the survey. Talia Fuste, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. That's our program. Thanks for listening. If you missed anything, you can find all of our past and current programs at firstcoastconnect.org. First Coast Connect is produced by Stacey Bennett. Our associate producer is Isabella Casapow. Our show is directed by Brady Corum, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us tomorrow when we talk how cuts to AIDS funding could leave 16,000 Floridians without access to care. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The Florida Theater presents Drew and Ellie Holcomb. The husband and wife indie folk duo bring their Never Gonna Let You Go tour to Jacksonville on Wednesday, February 11th at 7:30 p.m. Tickets and information available at floridatheater.com.